black cooking pot, filled with empty shells of mussels, lifting the lid twice the height of its designated location. White sauce covers some of the shells, and runs untidy on the outside of the cooking pot. If I tell you this piece is an artwork, one would not be surprised to encounter some indignant reactions. And, if I tell you this is one of the most iconic masterpieces of the second half of the 20th century, well, you can guess what's coming. The outrage and commotion would probably rise exponentially. If not, the realized price tag of this artwork of $358,000 will probably do the rest. At one side of the crowd, we hear, scandal, a disgrace, or a prank, and probably much worse things too. Whereas on the other side we hear, genius, exceptional, extraordinary, and a masterpiece. It is clear to say, both sets of crowds look at this artwork with a different pair of eyes, and a different frame of reference. But without tumbling into the never-ending non-debate of what is art, let's answer a more pertinent question when it comes to Marcel Broodthaers and his iconic pots of mussels. How did he arrive at these sensational sculptures, what do they mean, and how can one approach them? This is Contemporary Art Explained, Marcel Broodthaers, Moules Sauce Blanche, or Mussels White Sauce. Marcel Broodthaers was born in 1924 in Brussels, Belgium. He was in fact a poet, before becoming an artist. A starving poet to be more precise, failing to sell his sincerest poetry. As a result, in 1963, Broodthaers decided to become an artist. He felt as if he failed badly, being unable to sell anything, and unable to succeed in life. The almost 40-year-old Belgian poet was living in poverty, and something needed to change. Broodthaers said, "Finally the idea of inventing something insincere crossed my mind, and I set to work straight away." Symbolically, he embedded his 50 unsold copies of his book of sincere poems, titled Paansbed, in plaster, creating his first ever sculpture as an artist, already filled with his ubiquitous tension and balance of humor and criticism. Criticism towards himself, as an unsuccessful 40-year-old. But also, criticism, and arguably a lingering frustration, towards society and the cultural world, for his unanswered efforts as a poet. The Belgian artist was a highly literate man, with a very critical, and refreshing approach to visual art, due to his unique road to artistry. He was also a journalist and a filmmaker, which would be integrated into his works. From 1963 until his untimely death in 1976, Marcel Broodthaers would create an utterly impressive oeuvre, spanning just over a decade of work, leaving an inedible mark on contemporary art history, becoming one of the undoubted, most important, contemporary artists of his time. As a result, retrospectives have been held at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, or the Museum for Contemporary Art in Antwerp. His oeuvre is marked by the use of found objects, think of furniture, tools, clothing, and the shells of eggs and mussels, the use of collage, the use of written language, and larger-scale installations. Besides his cooking pots with mussels, one of his most famous works is his own Museum of Modern Art, which he opened in his house in Brussels in 1968. A concept which would travel the world, questioning and criticizing the institutional ideologies, and illegitimate classifications of value in art. Being a poet, Broodthaers uses literal stylistics, such as satire and contrapositions, for institutional or social critique, but also art criticism, as a self-conscious artist, producing self-conscious artworks, questioning themselves and the context in which they originate. Now, let's get back to Mussels White Sauce. If you are wondering which exact one of the different cooking pots with mussels we have shown, has been sold for $358, it is this one. However, as the quality of the picture is not terrific, we have shown you all other sorts of pots of mussels, so you get the idea. And the idea is exactly what the artwork is about. In the historical tradition of conceptual art, Broodthaers uses language as a structural element for ideas and meaning. This part is essential in order to approach, interpret and understand his works. A play of words or intentional puns approach contrasts or opposites, which are essential in contemporary art, certainly in the 1960s and 70s. For instance, the thing itself versus its meaning, the word itself versus the object it presents. This becomes most clear with his iconic assemblages using eggshells or mussel shells, as it is the case with this specific artwork, Moules Sauce Blanche, Mussels White Sauce, from 1967. Broodthaers combines several opposites with this work. Think of nature versus culture, the ordinary versus art, functionality versus unexpected aesthetics, or form versus content. Before diving into these differences, the most important play of words from which this frequent use of egg and mussel shells originates, is the confusion Broodthaers creates when it comes to the word mussel. In French, le moule means the mussel, and le moule means the mold. Intentionally, the Belgian artist does not specify in his titles if we need to approach the word as le or la moule, meaning there is a confusion if we need to read the mussel as what it is, a mussel, or as what the words alludes to, a mold. This play of words opens up a wide range of analogies and possible meanings. First and foremost, the mold refers to sculpture, thus referring to its own medium as a sculpture of found objects. The mussels become not only the mold, but also the final sculpture. Further, the sculpture refers to the complicated national identity of Belgium, presenting its national dish as a symbol for the nation. Think of his other works implementing the Belgian tricolour. Or, the mussel can also refer to the female sex. In French, the cooking pot or casserole also means prostitute, which opens even more combinations when it comes to possible meanings. So, is an artwork a plethora of valuable meanings, or is it, as Broodthaers implicitly suggests, an empty shell? He considered the mussel to be indecent, existing in its own shell, not allowing itself to be shaped in accordance with the whims of society, and in this sense it is perfect. It is clear to say one can find the most important characteristics of conceptual art in Broodthaers' oeuvre. The idea of the artwork is the most important, and contains more value than the actual physical object. Here lies of course the explanation for the great divide between people who shout "scandal" versus the people who would shout "masterpiece." It is not about the actual cooking pot and mussels, although there is a certain poetic and surrealist aesthetic quality in those objects. The cooking pot with mussels is merely a vehicular medium, transporting Broodthaers' idea and concept of the moule as a metaphor or symbolic construction. Further, the use of found objects is quintessentially bound to conceptual art, but also Dada, in the tradition of Marcel Duchamp. Besides being a conceptual artist, Broodthaers can be seen as neo-Dadaist and as a surrealist. Think of his strong connection with Piero Manzoni or René Magritte. Just as Duchamp, Manzoni, or Magritte, Broodthaers is marked by humor and wit, not always taking art too seriously. Think of Manzoni's Murder d'Artista, tinning and selling his own excrements as a limited edition series of artworks, ridiculing the artist and the economical value of what the artist produces. In a similar way as Manzoni, Broodthaers questions this value of authorship and the artist's signature. Throughout his career, Broodthaers has used his signature, MB, as a cumulative motive. Think of his series of La Signature from 1976. Doing so, he criticizes the art establishment and the ideology of the signature as a classification of value, and thus of economical value, making a satire of the artist and his signature being the thing that creates the value of the artwork, instead of the idea or the artwork itself. In a way, Broodthaers and Manzoni mock the art world. The ironic truth is satire and relevance made his signature even more valuable, being successful with the mechanisms he continuously undermines. When it comes to his connection with Magritte, we need to approach Mussels White Sauce, in a similar semiotic and language-based manner, as René Magritte's treachery of images. As Magritte, Broodthaers juxtaposes the object with its meaning by manner of language. Instead of using painting and surrealism, Broodthaers' weapons of choice are found objects and conceptual art. When it comes to the aforementioned auction result for the artwork in question, of $358,000, we're not surprised to see some indignant reactions. However, when one puts this into perspective with Magritte's $26.8 million auction record, other questions can be raised as well. Maybe, there are not enough cooking pots with mussels yet. And the truth is, this would make Marcel Broodthaers smile once more.